got it. All right. So it's just setting that up now. Right. Then I need to make sure it doesn't make a noise. That's it. Right. Okay, great. We've done that bit. Now, how do I get back to where I was? One moment. No. This is so weird. I've got all stuck. I don't know what's going on here. Wait a minute. Sorry. Oh, I'm screen sharing. Stop screen. Oh, there we go. Right. Okay, right. Sorry, everybody. Got that now. All right. Okay, so here we are. Let's start off with...
Now I can't hear you. I'm trying to figure out what I did.
Oh, okay. Whoops. Share. That's it. Oh, I see what I did wrong before. Okay, got it now. All right. ריבון העולמים ואדוני אדונים, אב רחמן וסליחות, מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, בקידה בשתחוויה שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש, ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו ומה חיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחור ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ועל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך, וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו ליראתך ולבבך, תקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הערל בסודות תורתך, ולימדנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך קרח ניחוח, ותאציל עלינו אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, שיתנוצצו ניצוצות עבודך הקדושים, אשר על ידם גלית את דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם, וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, למוד לנו לבן לקשר בדברים אלו, ובזכותם תראה עינינו במה שאנו לומדים, כמו אמר נעים זמירות ישראל, גל עיני והביט הנפלאות מתורתך, כאדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לרצוני מפי, וגאון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי. Amen. King Yitzhak. Now, something on the chat. Okay, great. All right, that's fine. Okay. Now, all right. Well, there's only hardly anybody here today. Never mind. We'll carry on. Sometimes people come in the middle. Now, I wanted to start off today with something I've been working on for actually quite a long time. And this is the whole, looking at the whole story of Jacob and the brothers from a sort of wider perspective, by looking at, the story of Joseph and the brothers from wider perspective. The story of Joseph, of how the brothers sell him into Egypt, basically selling him into slavery, not knowing whether he's going to live or die, not caring about him. And then you get the whole process eventually with the story of Benjamin and how the brothers come down to Egypt, and then eventually the reconciliation. And of course, this whole story raises up so many questions, and it goes over such a long period. It's told in so much detail in the Torah. I mean, you've got, it starts in Vayeshev, and it really only finishes in this week's Sidra Vayechi. So you've got Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi. So it's a huge story. It's a huge event, because it actually is from the moment when the brothers sold Joseph into Egypt. That's the whole beginning of the process, which is going to bring the children of Israel into Egypt. All right. So it's the beginning of the exile. Okay. So we're going to start off by looking at the thing as a whole, and then we'll go to one piece from the Zohar in Vayechi, all right? And so it's got elements of redemption. It's also got elements of exile in the whole story. So to look at it as a whole is actually very interesting. So I spent a long time on that this week, and I actually did a lot of writing. Now, let me see, how do I share that with you? I can send you the document afterwards if you like. Anyhow, let's share the screen, and I'll just read out to you what I wrote. And I was thinking it in terms of brotherhood, okay? Brotherhood is a concept that actually came about. It was very difficult for it to come about, and we're going to look at it. The development, I've called this the development of brotherhood as a prerequisite for redemption. When we read about brothers in the Torah, we find that the concept of brotherhood as we understand it today took much time and difficulty to emerge. The first brothers we know about are Cain and Abel. Cain represents within him the gift, the global will to receive oneself alone, which is the large vessels for receiving oneself alone, which came from the poison of the snake that Adam and Eve took into themselves by eating the tree of knowledge. As Abel represents the vessels of unconditional giving. And these two elements were so completely opposed to each other that they weren't able to live together, and Cain killed Abel. And the story of their brotherhood is just tragic. There wasn't brotherhood. Okay, and then we move over after Noah, we move now to the story of Abraham and his family. Now, in that story of Abraham and the family, we have the first set of brothers are Yitzhak and Ishmael. And again, there's separation. Yitzhak carries on the tradition of Abraham, but Ishmael separates, goes his own way, and forms a separate nation. Okay, and then from Yitzhak, we have Yaakov and Esau. And again, you have a similar thing. Yaakov remains in the framework of holiness, carrying on the tradition of his fathers Avram and Yitzhak. But again, Esau goes his own way, and from Esau comes other nations as well. Now, there was in a way of looking at this, we learn from the Zohar that the individuals mentioned within these pairs are in fact aspects of the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara as appear as different elements within ourselves. Okay? So the beginning of the contact with the framework of holiness, the desire to give unconditionally to God and to one's fellow man, starts with Avraham. And Avraham embodies the Svirah of Chesed, the Svirah of loving kindness. Okay, his life is built on giving. And by doing so, he comes into affinity of form with the Creator. He's davuk with the Creator. He's beloved because he is absolutely in affinity of form with him. He's one in that sense with the Creator. Just as God is merciful, so Avraham is merciful. And from Avraham come forth his two sons, Yitzhak and Ishmael. Now, Yitzhak actually develops the framework of holiness further, in that he embodies Gevurah. What is Gevurah? Gevurah brings the large wills to receive that stem from the purpose of creation into the framework of holiness, but he restrains these desires, doesn't just act on them all, and he offers them up as a sacrifice to God. That is Gevurah, okay? So he actually develops the service of God, okay, into another dimension, but he does it in a way that stays within the framework of holiness. In a way, these two are a little bit opposite. Chesed is all about giving, and Yitzhak is about restraining, okay? And then we have Yaakov, who embodies within himself the middle line. What does that mean? He takes elements from both Avraham and Yitzhak and desires to give in faith at all times, even when the light of God is shining, and he brings in the full development of the will to receive for the sake of giving. Well, we've also got to consider the other two brothers, okay? We said we're talking about brotherhood, all right? So we've got the half brother of Yitzhak, who's Ishmael. And what does that represent? The Ishmael within us is the klipa of the right-hand line. What does that mean? It's the part of us who simply prefers to ignore the need to work on ourselves. It represents our laziness, our willing to sit back and not try. It trusts in the ultimate mercy of God. Ishmael trusts in God. He's Yishmael. He's got God's name there. Okay, but he doesn't really want to do any work. He just trusts that ultimately God will have mercy on us. He doesn't want to work at all. Jacob's twin brother Esau is actually different. He's quite willing to work, but he wants to get for what he works. He wants the light of God, but he wants to receive the light of God for his own purposes, for his own self-gratification. He's not interested in giving. Okay, so we've got these different elements within us. Inside of us, we've got Abraham, we've got Yitzhak, we've got Ishmael, we've got Esau, we've got Yarkov, we've got all the different elements that are elements within each other. And so it's a job, you know. How are we going to reconcile these different elements within us? How are we going to deal with the difficulties that we have? And from this, we can see, it goes on to say, we can see from this why the Torah shows us in each pair of brothers, we've got the positive and the negative. Okay, we've got Yitzhak, Ishmael, Yaakov, Esav. All right. And this caused distance and separation between us. And then, of course, there's the same issues that we struggle within ourselves. The difference between the desires of the soul, which wishes to be in dveikut with God, and the desires of the body, which wants to receive self-gratification. All right. So that's basically the reason why, until we get to Yaakov, no brotherhood can emerge in the pairs that we've mentioned above. There wasn't even a concept of brotherhood. All right. They were so different. Okay. One was in the framework of holiness. One was in the framework of evil. There's just no way that they could relate to each other. Now we come to the family of Yaakov, and the situation's different. Yaakov begets the Shtei Misrei Shiftei Yah, the 12 tribes of Israel. And these are the 12 brothers who in time will form the 12 tribes of God, whose names are destined to be inscribed on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Okay, that's just amazing. I mean, they're going to be, all of them, in the service of the temple. All of them are destined to serve God in the framework of holiness. All right. Now we do see in Parshat Vayechi, when Yaakov blesses the sons, okay, each one gets a blessing, but they're very, very different. All right. So they all working in holiness, but they've all got their own pathways. So you can't say they're all the same. They're not all the same. They're all extremely different. Nevertheless, they're all heading in the same direction. They've all got the same goal, which is to come into affinity of form with God and come to serve God. So you would think that at a superficial glance, brotherhood should have been straightforward and easy. But we find in the ongoing parshiot that tell of the relationship between Joseph and his brothers, it was anything but. And we learn something very precious. We find that in order for the brothers to gain the attribute of brotherhood, they first have to lose brotherhood. All right. This story is not a Pariv story. It's not a neutral story. It's a very, very powerful story. Oh, I don't remember if I mentioned at the beginning, but I want to dedicate the learning to a Fur Shalema to Leah Bat Sarah. Okay, I should have said that earlier. So the Kabbalah, as taught by Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag, teaches us that no light can be attained without the appropriate vessel for it. Okay, what's a vessel? A desire. And you can't have a desire for something you've got. You can only desire something when you haven't got it. So we've got to create the conditions for the brothers to attain brotherhood, which is a light of brotherhood. The brothers have got to first desire brotherhood. All right. So they've actually, in a sense, got to realize they don't have it. And this is what happens. When the story starts, the brothers don't realize that brotherhood is an essential and important attribute for achieving the light of God. They've got no role model for it. You know, Yitzhak and Ishmael lived in the same family and just went their separate ways. Yaakov and Esau, Esau hated Yaakov, wanted to kill him. Okay, where's the role model for brotherhood? They don't have a role model for brotherhood, and they don't treasure it, and thus they lose it. Okay. And in a way, you can see that actually has to happen, because it's only when you've lost something that you begin to look for it. Very often, for example, you see young people, they're very, very, very careless of their health because they've never lost it. And it's only when somebody's sort of been through some sort of experience, unfortunately, losing their health, then they learn to value it. And we're like this for everything. Now, what happens? What makes them lose brotherhood? When we examine the text, we see that the brothers place much emphasis on the status of the mothers. They consider the mothers, Leah and Rachel, to be of a higher stature than the other wives of Yaakov, Bilhah and Zilpah, who were initially the handmaidens of Leah and Rachel, and they thus consider the sons born of the handmaidens to be inferior. So they forget they've all got one father. All right. So the first thing that happens is they're making a separation between, who's got which mother. All right. So this is how the Torah actually tells it. This is just a translation. Okay. But the text, obviously, you can read. These are the generations of Yarkov. When Yosef was 17 years old, being a shepherd, he was with his brothers with the flocks, and he was a lad. And he was with the sons of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Yosef brought evil tales about them to their father. Now, there's lots of commentaries which actually goes into how evil were these evil tales. Was it really Lashon Hara? Maybe it wasn't Lashon Hara. Maybe he only brought these tales in order for his father to rebuke them. He himself was not bringing Lashon Hara. I mean, okay, but it wasn't going to bring brotherhood. All right, that's what we're looking about this time at this moment. And now there's another thing. And Yisrael loved Yosef more than all his sons because he was a son of his old age. Again, what does that mean? And he made him a fine coat of colors. This is, not calculated to cause love between them. The fine coat of colors was probably techelet. And techelet, because color in those days didn't really exist. Most people wore sort of different shades of brown or beige because that was the color of the sheep's wool. And there weren't dyes in those days, permanent dyes. We're used to a very colorful world, but they didn't have a colorful world in those days. They had plant dyes, which didn't last, and techelet, that's all there was. So a fine coat of colors was actually a symbol of kingship, of the leader. And of course, that's not going to make him very loved. He was one of the youngest. Okay. So there was an issue there. All right. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the others. So they hated him and they could not speak with him peacefully. And Rashi says, at least there was one thing to their credit, that they weren't hypocrites. Okay, and then the next thing, Joseph dreamed a dream and told his brothers, and they continued to hate him. And he said to them, listen now to this dream which I've dreamed, and you will know the dreams, how they actually portray Joseph as being, again, the leader and everybody bowing down to him. All right. So none of this is likely to enhance brotherhood. And then the next thing that happens is Israel calls Joseph to him and tells him to go and see how the brothers are faring as shepherds in Shechem. And on the way, Joseph wanders in the field, and a man finds him, and he's straying in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you looking for? And the Zohar tells us that the man was the angel Gabriel. And he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me now where they're pasturing. And Rashi says, Yosef is looking for brotherhood. All right. He's looking for brotherhood. Now, he's the first one to realize that there's something missing here. okay, or to look for it. Now, the man says they've traveled away from him. Rashi says they've removed themselves from brotherhood, okay? And of course, we know what happens next. The brothers see Joseph coming from afar and they plot to kill him, all right? Now, there's different ways to look at this. Some commentators actually do find justification in the decision of the brothers. It's possible that the brothers interpreted the dreams as some type of idol worship, etc. All right. But whatever the possibilities were, and even if they were real, they did not give Joseph an opportunity to explain himself. And if you look carefully at the text, which occurs in Vayigash, the end of Miketz and Vayigash, this is actually, that seems to be the blame and self-guilt that they attach to themselves 22 years later, that they saw his distress and they didn't listen to him. They don't say we misjudged him. They quite might well have thought that they were correct in their judgment. All right. But they did not give him a chance to explain themselves. He was crying, he was upset, he was, pleading with them, and they did not listen. And that's what they feel guilty for afterwards. All right. They don't say, oh, we might have got it wrong. That's not what they're saying. This is very interesting. Okay. So there was what they feel guilty about is there was no compassion, no brotherly love. And yet the Zohar says something very interesting. The Zohar says that the Shekhinah was with them when they sold Joseph into Egypt. It's actually a fascinating piece. It actually says there that they were 9 of them present when they made that decision to sell Joseph into Egypt, and the Shekhinah made up the 10th to the minyan. Ad kedei kach, to that extent, the Shekhinah agreed with that decision. It's a very surprising statement. And you can look at it like this, the covenant was made with Abraham, which declared, you will surely know that your seed will be strangers in a land that's not theirs, and they will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. And we can certainly accept that there was a need for Joseph to go down to Egypt. But you can ask the question, why this way? All right. Let's ask a question. Let's imagine, all right, that you can imagine Joseph being sold to Egypt in a different way. Let's say when he's wandering in the field, he's looking for his brothers, he can't find his brothers, he's wandering around, and the band of Ishmaelites catches up with him before he meets his brothers. He gets kidnapped by them, taken down to Egypt. Exactly the same things happen to him. He's sold to Potiphar's household. He becomes very good at doing what he's doing. Then he gets, the Potiphar's wife gets tempted or tries to tempt him. He gets thrown into jail. All right. He stays in jail for 12 years. All right. And then Pharaoh yanks him out of jail to interpret Pharaoh's dream. He becomes second in command over the whole of Egypt. And then there's the famine and the brothers come down to buy food. You could have had the whole story. Why did it have to happen that Dafka, the brothers, sold him? What was the advantage to the Shekhinah that it had to happen that way, that the brothers actually sold Joseph into Egypt? If he wanted to bring Joseph into Egypt, it could have happened without that happening. Okay, everything else would still have happened in that way. But in that circumstance, if the band of Ishmaelites had kidnapped him without the brothers having sold him, they would not have felt guilt or shame on meeting Joseph. That's the difference. And neither Joseph nor the brothers would have realized that their relationship needed fixing. They would not have realized the need for brotherhood. They would not have realized the need for unity, despite their differences. So why did God want it to happen through the brothers' crime of kidnapping? And the answer is that the Zohar teaches that no light can be manifest without the vessel for it. Only when they discover their own lack of compassion, their own lack of brotherhood, Now they can begin to want it. Now they begin to value it. All right. And in the intervening years, both sides did tshuva. Everybody suffered from this. Everybody suffered from the actions that had been taken. The Zohar teaches us that Yehudah lost his position as king among the brothers because he was the one who'd suggested selling Joseph. Yaakov refuses to be comforted and the Shekinah leaves him. The brothers had the pain, and it was true pain, of seeing both their father Yaakov and their grandfather Yitzhak grieve. Okay. Meantime, in Egypt, Joseph is thrown into prison. And it's during this time that Joseph realizes that everything happens by the hand of God. Okay. And therefore, through that, he learns forgiveness. And when Pharaoh takes him out of prison to interpret his dreams, again and again, he emphasizes that everything happens from God's hand. So now, when the brothers come down to Egypt to buy food because there's a famine, Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. Joseph remembers his dreams and tests them to see what their behavior is between themselves. Okay. And then the Torah story. And Joseph remembers the dreams that he dreamed about them, and he says to them, "Oh, you spies, you've come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said, "No, we're not spies. We've come to buy food." And they tell the story, "We're sons of one man. We're honest. We're never spies." And he said to them, "No, you've come to see the nakedness of the land." And they tell the story of their life, that we're 12 brothers and the sons of one man. The youngest is with our father and one is gone. And Joseph keeps insisting, "No, you're spies." Okay. And then he says, "You will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here." Why does he want Binyamin? Okay. Now the Ari actually tells us that Yosef and Binyamin share the same spiritual madrega. They are both form the yesod of Zerampin. Yosef is the light of Zerampin. Binyamin is the vessel for Zerampin. Okay. And the vessel for the yesod of Zerampin. So why does Yosef want Binyamin there? Because he knows that without Binyamin present, he's not going to be able to bring the light that needs to be brought through at this time. Okay, so he uses this idea of bringing Binyamin not only to bring through a light of redemption, but in also to test the brothers at the same time. Okay, so you know what happens. Okay, he puts Shimon in prison. He puts them actually all in prison for 3 days. And then he says, no, okay, you go home. I'll just keep one of you, all right, and bring the grain for the hunger of your families, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words may be verified, and then you will not die. What does die? You'll be separated from God. Now, okay, on the superficial level, the brothers could have taken this behavior of the ruler of Egypt as just being, nasty behavior of, nasty officials to strangers, all right? But they do not. This is what they say. And they said to one another, "Indeed, we're guilty for our brother, that we witnessed the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. This is why this trouble has come upon us." They relate it to their own lack of brotherly love and regret what they had done. All right. So this is what they straight away realize. What are they doing? They're doing tshuva. First of all, what's the first element of tshuva? Confession. To be aware of what you've done. And that's what they do. Okay. They say they're guilty. They witness the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That's why this trouble has come upon us. And look how it must have preyed on their minds. You're talking about 22 years later, after the event happened. Okay. So the first element they're doing is confession. And they didn't know that Joseph understood. The interpreter was between them. So Joseph can now see that they see for themselves the lack of brotherhood. Is that enough? Now, to test whether it's enough again, he wants to see, are they going to act the same way again? He tells them to bring Binyamin down to see him, okay? And he needs Binyamin, like we said, so he can provide the means, because he needs Binyamin to bring the light of brotherhood and deliverance. So he sends for Binyamin. But Yaakov doesn't want Binyamin to go. Why not? Because even though Yaakov cannot express his Kedusha without Yosef, at least he's got Binyamin, which is some of it, all right? So he doesn't want to let him go. He says, no, I at least with that, I've got something. But Yehuda says to his father, send the lad with me, and we will get up and go, and we will live and not die, both we and you, and also our young children. And he says something extraordinary. I will act as guarantor for him. From my hand you can demand him. If I do not bring him to you and stand him up before you, I will have sinned against you all my days. And Rashi says, all my days in this world and in the next world. Now, what is a guarantor? That's a much deeper concept of brotherhood than we've had up till now. Brotherhood, what we've said up till now, is like, well, we haven't really had brotherhood now. So Yehuda is beginning to work this concept of brotherhood and to show us, what can brotherhood really mean? What is a guarantor? It means that if anything happens to him, I'm in his place. Like, for example, if somebody takes a loan, okay, he needs a guarantor. What is the guarantor? Somebody who's prepared to pay back the loan in the event of the first guy not being able to pay it. So he's actually standing in the place of the first guy. And this is what Yehuda is showing now, what the concept of brotherhood really means. It means standing in your brother's stead and be willing to take on his burdens for him. All right? I'm willing to stand in my brother's place. I don't see myself as more worthy to live than he is. I'm even willing to sacrifice myself for him. This is what Yehuda does. Okay? So it's with this new concept of brotherhood that Yehuda and the brothers return to Egypt, and this time they're taking Benjamin with him. But again, there's one thing to have an idea in one's mind. The question is, can we carry it through? And this is what Yosef tests in the next part of the story. He's really testing, do they have a vessel for brotherhood? And of course, when Yosef sees Benjamin, he weeps, but he restrains himself. He's not ready yet to reveal his light. And you know the story, when the meal, he gives the men a meal, and when the meal is finished, he tells the steward to place his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. And then after the men have already left, he sends him off to find the cup. Now, what happens? The men now act differently than they did in the case of Yosef. They don't abandon Benjamin to his fate, nor do they falsely accuse him. They turn back, and this time, all of them offer themselves as servants instead of Benjamin. It's really extraordinary. Yosef refuses the offer, saying that only Benjamin needs stay. And again, Yehuda relates their present trouble to the sin they committed with Yosef, saying, God has found your servants' iniquity. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and the one in whose possession the goblet has been found. And Yehuda says, what should we say? What should we speak? How should we exonerate ourselves? But Yosef says, no, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the goblet was found should be my slave, and the rest of you can go up in peace to your father. Yosef says, no, you're all free to go. Just leave Benjamin with me. Don't worry. What are the brothers going to do? Are they going to abandon Benjamin, his brother, to, as far as they know, a life of slavery, as they'd acted towards Yosef himself 20 years earlier? And then Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda approached him and he said, please, my Lord, let now your servant speak something in my Lord's ears. And he then recounts the whole history as Joseph's dealing with them from the first time they come down to Egypt, playing a special emphasis on the father's grief at the loss of Joseph and his fear of losing Binyamin. Okay. And this is what he says: for your servant assumed responsibility for the boy from my father. Your servant became a guarantor for the boy. All right. He guarantored. He's standing in Judah, is now standing in Binyamin's stead. That's the extent of brotherhood. Okay. He now displays the true qualities of a king. He takes responsibility. He demonstrates the quality of brotherhood and is willing to give up his own life and become a slave instead of his brother. And at that moment, that's the moment when Joseph says, okay. And he tells all the others, the Egyptians, to leave the room, and he reveals himself to him. This moment of revealing, the Zohar says, is actually revealing the light of redemption. Like we say, God al Yisrael. Okay, this is the way Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda comes close to Yosef, is the connection between Yosef and Yehuda, Geula, redemption and prayer. Okay, that's why we don't make a separation there. All right. And so the Zohar teaches that the moment when Yosef reveals himself, he reveals the light of redemption. But this could not have been revealed without the prior creation of the vessel for brotherhood. Brotherhood is actually the requirement for redemption. This is a very, very important something for us to understand. Okay, if we're looking for redemption, we have to have unity. We have to have brotherhood. Doesn't mean to say that everybody has to be the same, because we learn in Vayechi that not everybody was the same. All the different brothers were very different. But we do have to have the ability to act as guarantors for each other. All right. So following this idea of brotherhood in one family, as the children of Israel grew into tribes, the concept of brotherhood also widened until we get to the idea of Kol Yisrael Arivim Zeh Lezeh. All Israel are guarantors for each other. And the Torah relates that when Moses steps out of Pharaoh's palace in Shemot, what does it say? He went out to his brothers and he saw their burdens. So he didn't go out to just his tribe, which would have been his family. He went to his brothers, all of Israel. Moses upholds brotherhood with all the children of Israel, to the extent that Yehuda did. He stands in his brother's stead when he killed the Egyptian. There was an Egyptian persecuting a Hebrew slave. What does he do? He killed the Egyptian, and he himself, the prince of Egypt, Pharaoh's adopted son, became himself a fugitive and outcast. And it was this dugma of brotherhood, example of brotherhood that he gave, and then what came to this national brotherhood, Kol Yisrael Arivim Zeh Lezeh. There was a prerequisite for us to stand at Mount Sinai as one man with one heart. Okay. So now we've seen how the whole development from Joseph being sold down to Egypt, okay, was in the particular way he was sold, was to bring about brotherhood between the brothers, okay? And that was a prerequisite for them to be able to survive the exile, the servitude in Egypt. Very, very, very interesting. Okay, right. So that was that piece that I wanted to bring today. Oh, it's a shame that very few people are here today, isn't it? Oh well, never mind. Now the other piece I wanted to learn was actually a piece on Vayechi. Any questions, by the way? Nope. All right. Okay. Now, where was it? I have to. Oh no, that's not the bit I need. Here it is. Now, here we go. You probably can't see that, can you? Did I do that right? Ah, share screen. There we go. Right. That's it. Okay. This is a piece of the Zohar. Now, the Zohar in Vayechi is very difficult. Apparently, when Rav Ashlag was receiving this great learning and trying to write it down, he kept getting heart attacks, and he said the world wasn't ready for it, and he had to wait quite a few weeks until he got better to be able to write down this particular teachings. All right, please send that piece in the WhatsApp list. Yeah, okay, very good. It's still got a few spelling mistakes and things, so never mind. Hope you don't mind. Okay, I'll do that for you. All right, so, but anyhow, I thought if Rabbi Ashlag wrote it, we should at least try to learn it, all right? Even if we don't understand. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim 17 shana v'gomer. And Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. And of course, it's a very, very peculiar thing that Dafka in Egypt, Yaakov is Chai, Vayechi, you know. Amar Rabbi Yossi said, Lava Chama Benuvua B'Mitzrayim. Dihun Benohi Bakama Galvan Ad Hacha V'Ad Adna the Kates Mashicha. Right. Rabbi Yossi said, Libo Shel Yaakov, the heart of Jacob, Ra'ah B'Nevuah B'Mitzrayim, saw in prophecy in Egypt that his children will be in so many exiles, that is, in all the exiles until up to the end of time with the coming of Mashiach. That's what he saw, Vayechi. That's what that meaning of Vayechi is, that he got prophecy in Egypt. And a very peculiar thing. V'lo mata lenevuah de Vayechi ela b'Mitzrayim, v'hi nevuata me'aliyata, lo itnabiu b'dekafta, v'lo mata lehu shum inish min b'nei neviah, Elohu Moshe, Moshe Ketiv Ki Lo Yiran Yadam V'Chai, B'Yakov Ketiv Vayechi Yaakov Vayechi Nevuata, Danachta Mispat Klauya Danahara. And Yaakov didn't get to this prophecy of Vayechi, of this, getting this tremendous level of prophecy, and he lived, okay, except in Egypt. And this is a very high level of prophecy, Nevuah Hashuvah, that they didn't prophesy like that, okay? And none of the prophets ever got to this high level except for Moshe. Only Moshe alone. And of Moshe it's written, Ki lo yiran yadam v'chai, because no man can see me and live. And of Yaakov it's written, Vayechi Yaakov, and Yaakov lived. Perusho. Nevuah yoredet min marei ha'me'ira. It's prophecy at the level of Tiferet, okay? And then it goes into the particular level of prophecy that it was, all right? We can have a look at that. Perush, explanation. Because the illumination of this great light that he's received is called Chaim, all right? It's called life. From the inner meaning of the phrase, it's from Kohelet, V'chochma t'chayei baleha, and the Chochma will give life to its those who own it, those who have it, all right? So the word, this Chochma, this prophecy that he gets, is enclosed, is hinted at through the word Vayechi. that Yaakov receives prophecy Davka in Egypt, all right, of all places. And there's a great difference between the prophecy of Yaakov and Moshe and the other prophets. For the other prophets received their prophecy from a lower level, all right, from Netzach and Hod, all right, okay, whereas the aspect of the Malchut, and which is called the mirror which doesn't shine, all right, but Yaakov and Moshe received from Tiferet, which is a higher level, all right, which is the light was shining for them, all right. Nevertheless, they also received it from a place called Achoraim. It's not the full light, all right. It's because, as it says about Moses, you can only see what comes after me, but you cannot see the full revelation, all right. And again, this is why Yaakov had to receive this prophecy in the aspect of Egypt, all right, which is not where the full light is. Now, why Egypt? The Zohar goes on to say that, where was it now? I found it earlier. Oh, never mind, there's this bit here before we get to that. Yaakov wanted to say the prophecies of all the exiles that were going to happen to his children in the land of Canaan and in all the other lands that they were going to dwell in, which is and first of all, the land of Egypt. And that is to say that all the exiles are included in the land of Egypt. And his heart was broken. Shekatuv ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. All right. When they first say there's a famine, and he says yesh shever b'Mitzrayim, he says there's food, but it's a very odd word for food. The word shever is also mean breaking. All right. And your heart was broken. His heart was broken that his children would be in Egypt. And so it happened, you know, that Yaakov got this prophecy in Egypt, but he wasn't happy. Because in that land is all the connections with the paganism, with the wills to receive for ourselves alone. It was a hard place, all right, very, very, very hard. Now, why did they have to go there? Why did they have to go to Egypt? All right, what was the point of it? All right, explanation. When Adam Harishon, when Adam first ate from the tree of knowledge, what actually happened? It happened that the will to receive for ourselves alone, the egoism, the self-gratification, the avodah zarah, okay, the idol worship, all came into the human being. This is what actually came. And it says that the vessels broke and the sparks from all the light of Chokhmah, which originally Adam HaRishon had fell all over the place, and a large amount went into Egypt. All right, because Egypt is Klipa Kasha, really means the worst of the Klipot, and it's the pollution of the wills to receive were congregated there, and so he wasn't happy. So why did the children of Israel have to be exiled to Egypt? And ultimately it was because they needed to rescue these vessels which had fallen there. And this is what it says, they came out with great vessels, but vessels which they were able to bring into holiness. So they had to go down to Egypt. They had to get these vessels there. All right. And they were able eventually to bring them into holiness. And but Yaakov had this prophecy, but he wasn't happy. Okay. And then the Zohar goes and discusses the question, why was he called Yaakov at this point? Vayechi Yaakov Beretz Mitzrayim. Vayechi, he's got the light of God is shining on him. He's got these prophecies. Why isn't he called Yisrael? The name of Yaakov suggests something not full, not complete. Yisrael is the name of completeness. Why wasn't he called Yisrael at that point? Okay. He should have been called Yisrael. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says the name Yisrael is the name of Gadlut. But it wasn't necessary to emphasize that because it was obvious that Yaakov was in a place of Gadlut, of receiving the light of God. But he was unhappy, and that might have been why he's called Yaakov. Yaakov's got the aspect of din, of judgment. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says something very nice. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, "Bizman shayu Yisrael anshay met v'tzadikim v'osim tzedakah lo hayu mefachdim Yisrael." When Israel are true and righteous and giving tzedakah, then Israel is not afraid. Only Yaakov has the context of being afraid. That Yaakov was afraid. Okay, he was afraid to go down to Egypt. Don't be afraid, Al Tira Yaakov. Yaakov has the aspect of being afraid. But Yisrael is the name of Gadlut, the name of the light of God shining, Yashar El, straight to God. Ein bo pachad, there's no fear there. Because of the good deeds that Israel does, and they do when they do chesed with each other, when they do loving kindness with each other, okay, brotherhood with each other, then they have no need to feel fear. Mitachavu vitgalio, where are we? Zion. Okay, it's a very hard Zohar, so we can't do all of it. Mitachavu vitgalio al choveihon v'al ovdeihon bishin lo havu savlin yatei v'lo yahavin la'olma b'kushta al choveihon v'da'ati mekilita d'rachamei v'dina l'chud Yisrael v'hivat yeton ba'a galutan. And when they were sinned and they were exiled because of their sins and their bad deeds, and they were not able to suffer the fear that they would truly remain in exile forever because of their sins. And therefore, they came together, the mercy, the attribute of mercy with the attribute of judgment together, which is in the name of Yisrael. And Yisrael was given their name in the land of their exile. What does it mean? It means that when Israel went into exile, and always goes into exile, the Shekhinah is always with them. And therefore, they're always called the name of Israel, the children of Israel. And this name, the children of Israel, gave them the surety that when they will be redeemed, that they will be redeemed with the Shekhinah. And therefore, throughout the ages of which we've been in exile, the last one, the longest one of all, the 2,000 years of exile, they were never afraid that the exile will go on forever. They always knew, they always had the trust that God would bring us out of Israel, out of exile, because of the name Yisrael. I thought that was a very beautiful piece of Zohar. There was somewhere here where it actually said also that the Brotherhood was the vessel for the redemption, but I can't remember where it was now. Oh yes, one more bit. Bo'eh. Yaakov did not merit to bless any of his children except in Egypt. He had to, when he gave his children blessings, it was only when he was in Egypt. Okay. And what is this from? Vaya Yaakov yesh sheva b'Mitzrayim. And Yaakov saw that there was food in Egypt, sheva, but also means brokenness. And he said to his sons, why don't you go down to Egypt? Prophecy is only given to those whose heart is broken. Wow. Explanation. He didn't have the heart to bless his children except in Egypt, because there was no light, and because he was depressed. He didn't want to be in Egypt. Okay. And it says the prophecy came to him dafka because of his broken heart, how much compassion he had for his children. Oh well, that's just a little bit of Vayechi. And the name Yisrael contains with it both Rachamim and Din. It's a mixture. It contains the Yaakov is more judgment. Yisrael is mercy with judgment. So that's why the children of Israel are called the children of Israel, so that they remember that the exile is not forever. Okay. There we go. So there we were for today. All right.